And viewers, Ben, we're good to go. It's 6 o'clock, councillors, so we're going to start the meeting of Tuesday the 20th of September 2022, and we are here in the council chambers at East Gippsland Shire at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale. And welcome to this evening's council meeting. East Gippsland Shire live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair, and that is me tonight. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meeting will be open to the public via live streaming. Members of the public are invited to view the live stream council meeting by following the link on the council's website or Facebook page. If we encounter technical difficulties tonight with the live streaming during this meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed until a later time. Councillors, I will also point out that our agenda cover tonight is a magnificent photo of the Lindenow vegetable growing flats. So we always love to have the highlights of our Shire represented on our agenda. East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai, Kurnai, Monero and Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of this land that encompasses East Gippsland Shire, and we acknowledge their enduring relationship with country. The traditional custodians have cared and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland. CEO, good evening. We have a couple of apologies.
Good evening, Mayor. Yes, we have two apologies tonight. One from Councillor Buckley and one from the CEO, Anthony Basford.
Terrific, thank you. They are both noted. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? I think we do have a couple. Councillor White?
Yes, I would like to declare a conflict of interest for our planning application tonight on Christmas Street in Meetung.
Thanks, Councillor White. That is item 5.3.1, so we'll alert you when we get to that. Mr Cannizzaro, I believe, as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to declare a general conflict of interest for item 5.2.4 with respect to the Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Policy. As I'm the authorised officer to push the report through the system, the report is from the Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Committee. So I will stay for that session at the appropriate time.
Great, thank you. Item 5.2.4, we'll note that, and what a mouthful that title is. Councillors, I'm just going to ask for a confirmation of the previous minutes, item 1.4, and that is the council meeting held on Tuesday 16th of August and the unscheduled council meeting on Tuesday 30th of August be confirmed. So moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Uri, is the motion opposed, councillors? Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Thank you. I'll actually move that these, I'll ask that these council minutes be moved. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Sorry, I was a bit tongue-tied there. The next meeting, councillors, is on Tuesday, 11th of October 2022 to be held here at the same time at 6 p.m. Item 1.6, are there any requests for leave of absence? Acting CEO, as far as you know?
None have been received, no.
Okay, and we're on to item 1.7, which is open forum, which includes petitions, questions of council and public submissions. Acting CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. We have no petitions, but we do have a two-part question from Ms Cosette Murphy. She is not in the gallery tonight, has asked her question to be read out. So the first part of the question, just like solar panels, wind turbines only work when the wind is blowing. What other reliable, efficient and cheap energy, if it is to remain productive, is East Gippsland proposing, or is Council proposing for East Gippsland? And the second part of that question, we saw the failures of solar panels, wind turbine, electric cars, and the struggle to recycle them around the world. Is Council using the data to prevent the same outcomes for East Gippsland? And I will refer these questions to the Acting General Manager of Assets and Environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Chief Executive Officer, and through you, Mayor.
Absolutely, thank you.
Due to the complex nature of the questions, may I commit to taking the question on notice, and I will provide a detailed response and thank Ms Murphy for the question.
Yeah, thank you for that too.
Thank you, Mayor. And we had no public submissions.
Thanks for that. We'll keep moving on. Councillors, before we get to item 2, the notice of motion, I'd actually like to propose a condolence motion for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and it will appear behind me on the screen. So, councillors, we join Australia, the Commonwealth and the world in mourning the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty the Queen passed away on 8th September after a 70-year reign as Australia's head of state. Her Majesty was our sovereign, devoted to her duty, highly respected throughout her unprecedented reign, and much loved here and around the world. And I'll also note that she was a mother, a grandmother, and a family member of a large extended family as well, which we should not forget for somebody who is in the public life and the public realm for her whole life. So, councillors, on behalf of East Gippsland Shire and our community, we offer our deepest condolences to His Majesty King Charles III, the royal family, and all those mourning the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So, councillors, there's a recommendation in front of us there on the screen, and I'm wondering if anybody would like to move that as a motion. Councillor Stowe, do we have a seconder? Councillor Allen, would you like Councillor Stowe to speak to that motion?
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. Look, she's been a great lady and a great asset to this country for a prolonged period of time, and I think all we can do is admire her and wish King Charles II all the very best for the future.
Well, maybe King Charles III. King Charles II was in a bit of strife, I think, so King Charles III.
I do stand corrected, Mayor. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe.
Yeah, me?
Absolutely, Councillor Allen.
Look, she has been a constant for 70-odd years, and I think one of the great attributes that she's had, that even through personal turmoil and everything else that she's reigned over, she's done it with great dignity, and she will be a huge loss around the world because of the stability that she has brought to our governments.
Councillor Allen, thank you. Councillors, I'll go through the procedural motions. Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to the motion or against the motion, or in any way speak? Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, CEO. Carried unanimously. And what an amazing event the ceremony was last night. The English certainly know how to do ceremonies like that. It's really incredible. Councillors, we're moving on to item 2.1, and we have a notice of motion. And Councillor Stowe, this is your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm sure you've all read the motion, so I won't repeat it all. But I'd just like to say that if we go ahead with this, there's no disadvantage to everybody. There's just winners in this. A few years ago, there was a rejig of Nicholson Street between the Mall and Service Street, and that resulted in 17 car parks being lost.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. What's your point, Councillor?
Just on a matter of procedure, I believe Councillor Stowe needs a seconder before he...
Thank you. Let's do that, absolutely. So your point is upheld, so that's correct. So is there a seconder for Councillor Stowe's notice of motion? Councillor White, thank you. Thanks for that point, Councillor Uri. Councillor Stowe, go.
Thank you. So as a result of that rejig, there were 17 car parks lost to that area of Nicholson Street. And I understand at the time the mix of businesses in Nicholson Street was somewhat different, and they envisaged the extension of the footpath and the reduction of car parking having a benefit to the businesses along there being able to put their products out on the footpath. Well, this hasn't happened, and the businesses along there are hurting for a number of reasons. Woolworths have moved, a number of shops have closed, and in addition, of course, there's been these 17 car parks lost. So what I was doing is asking the staff to do an assessment there, and it would seem a fairly simple matter to remove the bollards, not remove them, relocate them back to their former spot on the footpath. You don't have to touch any trees or any vegetation. Put in some additional car parking. We won't get the 17 back, but I think we can get probably half of them back. And also up the end of the street at the Mallee near the toilets, there used to be car parking there, which has also been replaced with bollards. Again, if the bollards were moved back a few feet, we could have a loading zone up there which would be beneficial to the area. Finally, I think there's something we can look at with the overall CBD, and that's 2-hour parking in that area. At the moment, it's all 1 hour, and it was pointed out to me recently that a lot of women are going to get their hair cut, or styled, I probably should say, in that general area, and they can't get it done in an hour. They need longer than that, and this could prove to be a good spot and a good selling point for the street to have that done. So as I say, I don't believe there's any disadvantages to do this. The area is not being used. We're retaining the beauty of the area with the trees and vegetation that's already there, and it would be of great advantage not only to the shops but also to the shoppers. Thank you.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I fully agree. Been there several times and tried to get something to happen, but also along the way there was also proposals to redesign the car park, which I think we'll call the Spotlight car park, which was going to allow, with a redesign, several more car parks. That's not happened. This has been sitting on the books for probably 4 to 5 years, and still nothing's happened there. So I think we just need to get somebody to give us a new report so as we can look at these options and get better use of the space that's available there in Nicholson Street and that car park. Thank you.
Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed?
Mr Mayor, if I could ask a question, please, of our officers.
Absolutely, I'll allow that. Of the officers, yes, sure.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is to Mr McConnell. It's around about the Bensdale growth strategy, which I know is a current strategy of councils. My question is around the issues that Councillor Stowe raises and sees need to be addressed through his notice of motion. I'm wondering whether there's any alignment with the growth strategy and whether those issues could be addressed through that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. So there is some alignment. So we have a proposal to revise or update the Bensdale growth strategy. We're currently waiting on a funding application, outcomes of that, to determine exactly how we proceed, but the expectation is that we'll be able to commence some work probably in the first part of next year in relation to an update of the Bensdale growth strategy. That will cover off a broad range of issues in terms of the growth of Bairnsdale as a whole, but as part of that looking at the functioning and the nature of the CBD. So I would anticipate there'd be alignment between some of the issues, but also some of the issues that Councillor Stowe has identified go down to a level of detail that probably wouldn't be covered within the growth strategy. So those two pieces should ideally align, but the work that's requested is probably of a finer grain detail in terms of the functioning of that particular part of the CBD. I would imagine the Bensdale growth strategy will look, though, at that question of the function of the CBD, how it's operating, how it's changing in the light of some of the proposals that are on the cards at the moment in terms of other developments, and therefore would then probably come back to some of the issues that have been raised.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. So I was happy to suspend debate there actually for that moment. So that's actually fine to get that clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's
then
good.
I would like to speak against the notice of motion then.
And please go ahead. That was my next question.
Thank you. So firstly, I'd like to commend Councillor Stowe Councillor Stowe, we all know, is very passionate about the business community and looking for ways to support the business community in Bairnsdale, and I also support that and want to do what I can to support you, Councillor Stowe. You've previously brought to this council the issue of signage on footpaths and also tables and chairs on footpaths as ways to stimulate and invigorate, I suppose, our CBD. And I commend you for those, for that as well. I think that I think you've identified an issue that is very important. I think it's quite sad to walk through some areas of our CBD at the moment, with seeing the empty shops and so on. So I am really keen to support the part of your motion that is asking officers to come back with a report as to how we can stimulate the CBD. However, I find that I think the wording of the notice of motion indicates that you see increased car parking and loading bays as part of that solution. I think we need to look at the problem and strategically look at ways to stimulate first, without presuming that we know that increasing car parking spaces and loading bays is an answer to the problem. So I'm looking for a more strategic way to do that, and I suspect from the answer from Mr McConnell, we could do it through using the Bairnsdale growth strategy. So that's why I'm going to oppose the notice of motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Yes, Councillor Crook.
I'm wondering if I can propose an amendment.
Can we do that at this stage? I think we probably can. What is the amendment? I'll ask the mover if they accept that.
The amendment would just be to add the words active transport. So the motion would then remain the same. So I'll read the alternate motion. Request officers to bring a report to a future council meeting in 2022 outlining physical improvements that could be made to the Nicholson Street in Bairnsdale to create additional parking, active transport and loading areas, and other business attraction initiatives that could be considered by council.
Councillor Stowe?
Could I ask Councillor Tom to define active?
Give it a go, Councillor Crook.
Okay, sure. So I guess that would be using modes of transport that aren't necessarily motorised. So I'm talking about pedestrian access, bicycles, scooters possibly, skateboards, not cars per se. So it certainly wouldn't seek to
Pick up your shopping on the skateboard.
Certainly wouldn't seek to exclude the provision of extra parking if the officers were to identify that as the strategic, opportunity that is there. I'm not looking to curtail more parking if that's desirable, but just to add specifically in that element of active transport as well, because I think that there's multiple benefits to our community in including those things.
Councillor Stowe, do you like the idea of active transport?
No, I don't like the idea. You might be surprised to know. Look, whether we like it or not, we're a mode of...
So I just yes or no to the no. Okay, so you're not going to accept
No.
No. Okay. Sorry. All right, so that's the end of that conversation then. That makes it relatively easy.
Yep.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case, you have a right of reply, Councillor Stowe. I believe we do, yes, that's
Thank
right.
you.
Even
Look,
in
the right
notice
of
motion.
reply is that we're a motor-driven society down here, whether we like it or not. You've got to accept it. We don't have trams, we don't have buses, or very limited buses. We don't have much public transport. And people aren't going to rock up on their skateboard to pick up their groceries at Woolworths, let me tell you. They rock up on their BT50 or their Maserati or whatever they're driving, and they pick them up in their car. And if you don't have parking, they don't stop in front of that business, and that business loses out. And Nicholson Street's a prime example of that, where the parking's poor and the businesses are really suffering. We need to help them, and we can help them. And it's a simple matter to help them. It's not expensive. There's no disadvantage to move the bollards back and put some more cars parking in there. It doesn't affect anybody. It just helps people. It helps the customer and it helps the businesses.
Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Councillors, thank you. Let's move on to deferred business. I don't think there is any deferred business. Councillors and delegates' reports. Councillors, Councillor Allen, are you happy to lead off? And we'll go around this way today.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll do this in top point form, otherwise we'll be here forever. During the course of the last 5 weeks, it is now, I've attended the Orbos Innovation Network dinner at Marlow, along with Councillor Crook, attended the neighbourhood house open day that they had at their neighbourhood house and food bank in Paynesville. I had the pleasure of opening the Next Generation exhibition at the gallery. Great. I accompanied the Mayor to the Bairnsdale Fire Station march-in and station opening, which was a fantastic day. And later that evening, had the pleasure of attending the Lakes Entrance Fire Brigade annual dinner, which was the first annual dinner for 3 years, which was a very big event. Then, of course, the 5th and the 6th of September, I joined the rest of the councils on our field trip to Lindenow and Bengwarden and Wyong Oval. And I particularly think that we need to thank Ross and Andrew and Sally at Lindenow for their hospitality and their, well, more than hospitality, to take us through the working parts of their businesses. It was really good. And one of the other really notable things was on the 9th, along with Councillor Urey, I attended the Marlow campus of the Alpine School for their Community Day end of term event. And every time you go to something like that, you come away feeling really, really confident that the next generation are going to be pretty damn good. And at the insistence of 3 of my elderly sisters, I also have to mention the opera in the church that was held on Saturday at St Mary's Church, which apparently has been deferred for 3 or 4 times because of COVID, and according to them it was an event worth coming for, and one of my sisters come from Western Australia to go to it, so it draws from a long way.
A busy time. Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Stowe.
No, Mayor, I've been away for 3 weeks and done very little, to tell you the truth.
And you do it very well too. We follow your travels and your travails, so well done. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the pleasure of attending the Paynesville Community Centre there and the launch of its food bank several weeks ago, along with Councillor Allen. And look, they really are doing a fantastic job there, and it's very concerning just how many people are using that service. There's obviously quite a section of our community who are struggling to feed themselves. So that's a really important service and one that I'm interested in supporting into the future, and I congratulate all those people who are involved. I attended the offshore wind community consultation in Lakes Entrance a couple of weeks ago. All the federal and state government representatives were there, along with some of the company representatives. And my takeaway was that I'm just a little in awe of the scale of what is being proposed there, and we'll talk about it a bit later on in tonight's meeting, so I won't labour the point, but we're talking about $40 billion in investment. This is unprecedented, I think, in my lifetime and experience, and I just hope that our council is able to capitalise on the opportunity that are presented by that transition to offshore wind. We're really looking to replace the power infrastructure, the generation capacity in the Latrobe Valley. I think it currently is about 4,000 megawatts. They're talking about 12,000 megawatts of offshore wind.
Incredible.
In the next couple of decades. So the scale of investment is quite mind-boggling. So, also went out to Lindenow and Bengwarden, which was great. Talked to the communities out there about their concerns, and toured around some of our larger farms and vegetable production areas. Again, the scale of those operations is, if you haven't seen them, very impressive. And of course, they're a really significant contributor to our local economy. And then last night I was at Paynesville for our service centre and library consultation session. which I think was quite productive. And I thank everybody who participated in that, and just mentioned that those consultations are ongoing right around the region and our Shire over the next couple of weeks. So I encourage everybody to participate. Thank you.
Councillor Crook, thanks. Busy time. Councillor Uri?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to submit my report for inclusion with the minutes, but just wanted to mention two events that I've attended over the last few weeks. One, on the 7th of September, was a day to mark Threatened Species Day. Our East Gippsland Art Gallery was very active in this space. We know the Art Gallery, of course, because council is a major supporter of that gallery. They were running activities with children from several of the local primary schools, and they had about 250 little cutouts of endangered fauna, which were provided by the men's shed, apparently, and these were painted by the school children, and they were mounted and then placed in our beautiful flower beds in the Main Street Gardens, which are so exceptional at the moment with spring. But they were there to stay for a few days so people could sort of find them and appreciate them, I suppose. This event was to mark the fact that there are at least 40 threatened species of fauna in East Gippsland, 40. I was surprised it was that few. I think actually that there are more, but it's a horrifying number. Our art gallery continues to provide wonderful, engaging, educational and fun activities, especially for children. So this event was following on from the South East Now exhibition, which featured Koori artists with connection to Gunai country. Exhibiting artist Leanne Edwards was apparently wonderful in the role of entertaining and educating the children who came to the gallery. And I believe over 500 primary school children visited the gallery for that exhibition. And Mr Mayor, I'm hoping that you might be going to speak about that wonderful new artwork on the wall in our...
That's pretty nice, isn't it?
Chamber, yes. The other event, just briefly, was on the 8th of September. It was an Advancing Women's Leadership online summit. And it went all day, really, but there was a wonderful address from the Honourable Julia Gillard, which I really appreciated. And there were many gems in her address, and I just wanted to go through a few of those. We swim in a gendered world. We need role models to routinely see women in leadership positions in order to imagine it. Women who step forward with ambition will be seen as unlikable and attract negative comments. The research is clear. The more diverse the team, the stronger is its decision-making. There is a lot of activity, but not much outcome yet. Women in leadership are helped by family support as well as by strong mentoring. Men are needed to support the cause of women in leadership. Ambition in the service of others is to be aimed for. And she finished with 3 key tips. Be clear about your motivation, have a strong sense of self, and time management. It was really a wonderful seminar. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. And thanks for that reference to Patricia Pittman's piece of beautiful art over there. It is really lovely. Councillor Greeson, what have you been up to?
Thank you. I had 4 weeks holiday too, which was wonderful, but I've been pretty busy since I've been back. But I just wanted to add to what people have said about the community council and community visit to Lindenau. We talked to community members about, you know, their pride in their sports ovals and their netball courts, etc., etc. But they also showed us their toilets and change rooms, and in particular the women's, and it's they're very much in need of upgrading, so that it's, you know, the gender equity issues are pretty paramount there. I was really impressed listening to Ross Ingram from Bonaccord and Andrew Bulmer talk about their businesses and how entrepreneurial they are and how they're constantly seeking innovative solutions to things, and it's really, they're so impressive. But in particular too, their approach to employing people to work on their farms are quite different, and so the way they attract people to their farms, but also how they look after them while they're there, is quite different. And I think they're 2 quite interesting models that would be well worth looking into, you know, and examining, researching really, I think. I also went on the 8th of September to float at Fisherman's Landing in Lakes Entrance, running a social enterprise program, and there were a dozen kids from Malakuta High School who had canoed from Mingling Waters to Fisherman's Bend over 3 days and 3 nights, and they were happy and tired and waiting for a fantastic feed of wild venison and roast veggies. And it was an event organised by Up the Creek and Canoeing with Derek Cook, who's, I think, doing wonderful work with young people. There's a few other things, but I'll just mention too that I invited Marnie Connolly, who's a senior lecturer at Monash University School of Rural Health here in Bairnsdale, to come and talk about her PhD, and most of the councillors were there and senior staff officers were there. I think it's really important research. It's certainly the first of its kind in Australia and possibly the world, because it looks specifically at the social and economic impacts a small medical school has on its rural communities. So I'll just list some of them. As I heard her speak, there's a lot of pride expressed from people in the communities about having a university in their towns. The opportunities for education of local people, as well as attracting students from elsewhere to stay long term. Research opportunities for issues of local importance, like the sort of work that's been done, is the state of the lakes and impact of certain activities on effectiveness of a kindergarten's work. And the financial benefits were in renting accommodation, buying food and goods, and the spending by students and staff and their visitors, and it was significant. Employment of staff and teachers, and bringing diversity to the town. And the council afterwards had quite a bit of, we sat around and had quite a long discussion about it after Marnie left, and we've agreed to write to the head of school indicating our interest in attending a launch of the research and to visit the school again and have a look around. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll all celebrate the conferral of Marnie's doctorate on her. That'll be fantastic. An amazing achievement. Councillor Van Diggle.
Thank you. Unlike some other councillors, I've not been on holidays. So it's been quite a busy few weeks because I did forget about the fact that we didn't have a meeting 3 weeks ago. I haven't got any information on me, but I did attend a 4-day conference in Adelaide on disaster resilience. So I will do a write-up about that and include that. I didn't send that to Vanessa. I forgot that was meant to be in this week's notes. But I'll just talk about 2 things that I've attended that I'm quite excited about. One of them is, and I've spoken to the councillors about it, is the sensory pilot project or program at the Bark. So the Children with Additional Needs Working Group actually advocated to the Bark requesting 2 hours a week for quiet time at the pool for children, or more broadly just anyone with sensory overload, because in the Bairnsdale pool it can be really loud at certain times of the week. Not just, I mean, I've been there when children have their swimming lessons and it's loud, but put the buckets and the sprinklers and all that added on can be too much for children. So I do some work with the Children with Additional Needs Working Group, and they did a consultation with families through Facebook, and they received over 100 comments all up of families who actually identified that they travel to Lakes Entrance to take their kids swimming, even though they live in Bairnsdale because of the noise. So through a bit of advocacy, Ryan and Chris from the Shire have agreed to start running that pilot program as of term 4. 1 hour during the week and 1 hour during the weekend. At the moment, the identified time by parents was the morning as the preferred time. They can't make that happen in term 4 because they already have their general programs running, but they're going to look at in next year if they can start running that in the morning. So I think that's really exciting that council's being really proactive in the space of inclusion. The advocacy was based on children, but I think it goes for everyone that has a bit of sensory overload. I think it's going to be a really exciting project. And the other thing is that I wanted to talk about, because I've attended similar things to what other councillors have been talking about, was Tom and I actually met, Councillor Crook and I actually met with someone from the community about the housing crisis, and they've done a lot of work in that space in Melbourne, and we just got some ideas off them. So I've put it into my written report, but some of the ideas that we've identified as a group that we can work on are really in the future. Like advocating for the big housing build, those houses aren't going to be built for several years. So just trying to figure out what we can do in the short term to mitigate some of these issues. So we spoke about incentivising landlords to choose long-term rentals rather than opting for short-term options, whether that's through permit system or rate differentials. So I know that's a conversation that we're going to keep having. I just want the community to know that it's still on our radar. And then I spent a week being sick again, so...
Yeah, and it's going around. But thank you for that. And that work on how we can be more inclusive for young people who are neurodiverse is really important. And sometimes it doesn't take much except awareness to make places more inclusive for neurodiverse young people.
Yeah,
so
and I might also
great.
add, because you've just said that, is that Chris and Ryan were really interested in furthering that conversation about how it can be more broadly at the buck, at the gym, at the entrance, at the pool, at the basketball court. So they were happy to have that as the start, but they were very interested on how they could improve overall. And I thought
I think we're getting more and more information and knowledge about neurodiversity and understanding those young people. Every one of them has their own instruction book, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's no one blanket neurodiverse solution. So,
exactly.
the more we understand, the more inclusive our organisation will be. Thanks for that. Councillor White, no doubt you've been busy.
A little bit on. I'll briefly speak to the being in the community at Lindenow and being warden, area that I know quite well. But I'd like to, because everyone else has spoken about it, I'd like to comment on the farmer who produced that document at Beng Warden, the rates and how difficult it is and how more difficult it's becoming for farmers because of the way the rates are structured. Mm-hmm. And I hope that other councillors who got that document given to them have read it. So as in this next budget period, we can actually start to think a lot harder on how we can make this fairer in our municipality, because the farming community is getting smaller, and for many, even though people think it's a great way of living and there's a big income out there to be made, it's not quite that true, and especially for many of the smaller farmers. So I acknowledge the receipt of that document, and it could be something for us to use as a bit of evidence going forward into this next year's strategy for our budget. It seems to be a night for condolences, and I would like to acknowledge a past employee of this Shire who's on the honour board out in the foyer, Terry Lamshed. He began his service with the Shire before amalgamation. It may have been Tambo that he worked with, and that was in 1983. So he received his 20 years of service in 2003, but continued to work for the Shire for another six years. So he did 26 years of service. He was well known, well liked and respected as an employee of the council. He was dedicated to his job, extremely dedicated to his job. I came to know him through the work I did in what we call fire prevention, and that was Terry's job, was to ensure that to the best of his ability and getting the most out of the budget he was allocated, that he could make our roads and our properties safer during fire season. And he did so much work there. And I'm certain he will be missed by many of his colleagues who would have been his friends here at the Shire. But just to pass on, I might just make this a broad, pass on condolences from this Shire, from these councillors here in the room, to his service, and the condolences to his wife and his family. It was a much liked and pleasant person, so thank you.
Councillor White, thanks so much for bringing that to our attention and reminding us, because I was aware of Terry's passing, and that information did come around through the networks and the family I'm aware of and know some of his children. But yeah, that's really well noted, and we really appreciate that. So I think that everybody will join you in acknowledging the passing of Terry Lamshed. Councillors, I've got a number of dot points here, but I'm going to draw on a couple of, in particular, since our last meeting, and one was the launch of the Lgbtiq plus strategy. And this was a really important, small but powerful gathering of people here. Unfortunately, Todd Fernando, the Commissioner, couldn't be with us. But the take-home for me was around the lack of data and information about people who identify as LGBTIQ+, and mainly because the census doesn't recognise it. People who identify aren't working in this area, and so there's no visibility. And when there's no visibility and no representation, you have no data. And it's a really important piece of work that I think that we should be reminded of, because as councillors we like to make evidence-based decisions, and if we don't have any evidence, it's a bit like talking about neurodiversity. Unless we're made aware and have evidence, we tend to blunder on blindly. So that was a really important piece of work, and maybe we could have some more information around that and about that strategy at some stage. Acting CEO, it was a really powerful piece of work. I wanted to note also the biggest PJ day that was done. Now, I like dress-ups, so I did get dressed up in my pyjamas and went to Marlow Primary School. But this was a particularly interesting day, and Councillor Uri, I know this is particularly close to your heart because it was about supporting out-of-home care and foster kids in foster care. And this was a piece of work that was done by one of the syndicates who are participants in GCLP, Gippsland Community Leadership Program, this year. And of course the Shire is a supporter of GCLP, and we all understand the importance of supporting leadership. And GCLP has an action outcome of their particular work, and that is the syndicates actually produce a project, a community project that supports the community, and that was that particular project around supporting kids in foster care and out-of-home care. And that's an issue at the moment, councillors, and we should promote that. Councillor Uri, you also mentioned our beautiful artwork, so Patricia Pittman's work over here, which is hanging and brightening this chamber and really enculturing our chamber as well. And that I had the absolute pleasure of being able to choose that piece of art for the Shire from the East Gippsland Now exhibition. And so it's brightening our walls, and it's a beautiful piece of work, the Bogong Moths. And while I was there, I actually fell in love with a piece of Alan Solomon's work and purchased it myself, which is another piece of work around Bogong Moths and portrayal of the Bogong High Plains, which is particularly close to my heart. And the challenging thing about buying a piece of art from a gallery and an exhibition is you have to have deferred value, because it sits there on the wall for a couple of months before you're allowed to take it home. But I guess the upside is lots of other people get a chance to enjoy it before you have it in your private residence. So that was really fantastic. And there was probably one other thing that I wanted to mention. Oh yes, the Gippsland Business Awards. Now that was a particularly big event. It was a really great event, and I was really pleased to be there with one Gippsland colleagues, so the other local government entities. And I'll just make a point that Yates Media received a particular, I think, a lifetime award at the Gippsland Business Awards. So just to acknowledge that. They've been around for a long time. And no, they're an enduring company, and they have been here for the long haul through the good times and the bad times, and that was a particularly important part of that particular evening at the East Gippsland Business Awards at Federation Uni in Churchill. So there's a couple of the things out of the list, and I'll put that in a written report, but that's enough from me for the moment. Thanks for your reports, councillors, and thanks for the work you do being out there in the community. It's so important that you turn up. That's right. Absolutely. Councillors, we're moving on to item 5.1, which is assets and environment, and 5.1.1, submission on East Gippsland area under consideration of offshore renewable energy. And we've got Wayne with us as well. And Morgana, are you dealing with this in the top level and introducing it?
Thank you very much,
That's
Mayor.
fantastic. Thanks, Mr. Power.
So good evening, Mayor, Good
Good
morning,
evening.
councillors. Before you is a report titled Submission of the Gippsland Area Under Consideration for Offshore Renewable Energy, which is seeking approval from Council to submit to the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resource. Salient points of the report for Council to consider. The area of the Gippsland coast has been earmarked for potential development as an offshore renewable energy infrastructure area by the Commonwealth Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. The Commonwealth has now commenced a community consultation process to assess communities' views about this proposition, and East Gippsland Shire Council has been invited to participate in this process. Following some preliminary consultation with councillors and community members attending a recent information centre session, the attached draft submission has been prepared for the consideration of council. Councillors should note that the size of the Commonwealth and state government's proposal for the Gippsland coast will transform Gippsland into a renewable energy powerhouse, effectively replacing the Latrobe Valley coal-fired power station with large-scale wind generation. It will also impact Gippsland communities, particularly those located in Basque Coast, South Gippsland, Wellington and the Latrobe Valley, through landscape scale changes to the region's environment, economic and social profile. With me tonight is Environment Sustainability Coordinator Wayne Burton, who's available to answer any technical questions you might have. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. And I know a number of councillors attended that drop-in session at Lakes Entrance a few weeks ago. And yes, we were all astonished at the scale of the proposal and the scale of the turbines, and it's really transformational. But councillors, are there any questions? We note the report that Wayne's put together and acknowledge that and appreciate that. Any questions of our officers? Councillor White and then Councillor Greason.
Yes, it's obviously a massive way of producing power. Wayne, when it gets from the ocean floor to the mainland, will it be taken underground to the distribution points, or would they put a transmission line in? If they're going to put a transmission line in, I'm just thinking to myself, that doesn't appear to be the nicest option visually, or for perhaps low-flying aircraft or birds, etc. But I'm getting a vibe from Councillor Crook that it's going to go on poles or on pillars.
Correct, yeah. It will be going above ground. It's too expensive to do it underground. There is some existing infrastructure they intend to expand, I believe. Talking to VicGrid about this, so the Bass Link comes in down around South Gippsland, so they'll look at bringing power through there initially. So the idea is that they're going to use existing infrastructure where they can, but as this proposal expands, it's undoubtedly likely that additional transmission infrastructure is going to be needed, and that will be above ground, and it will be require to go over private property, I would suggest.
Thanks, John. Councillor Greason, you had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Two parts to my question, Wayne or maybe Councillor Allen. This project's not going to go up to and across the waters around by East Gippsland. Does this? Can I have an explanation about why? And secondly, is this going to disadvantage East Gippsland in any way? There's clearly advantages and disadvantages to the project, as you've outlined in this very good paper, but will we be disadvantaged by not being particularly included in the project?
To answer the first part of your question, so the reason that the area off the East Gippsland coast is not included, I believe there's two reasons for that. One is that it was a bit of a trade-off, if you like, for the fishing industry, so that there was an area there that wouldn't be affected. And the other reason is that there's an exclusion zone sitting off the coast of Sale. So that's for the defence base at Sale RAF base, and also there's some existing oil and gas exploration rights that exist in that area, which they didn't want to take away at this stage. So that means that the area west of Sale is predominantly where the pylons or the renewable energy resources would be made available. Is that a disadvantage or an advantage for East Gippsland? I guess that depends on your viewpoint. I think there are risks here for East Gippsland, definitely, in that the investment will be further to the west, and that could result in a loss of employment skills as people relocate into that area for other employment. So that's a real risk, I think, for the Shire. But there'll be other people who'll be quite pleased to know that the area off our coast isn't going to be developed with large wind farms on the horizon, and the implications of transmission lines and the like are not going to be an issue for us. I think it depends on your point of view. But there's definitely economic opportunities and there's economic risk and social environmental risks with this project too. We need to be mindful of that.
Thanks for that, Wayne.
Thank you.
Acting General Manager to Power, did you have anything further to add? I saw you on the edge of your seat there for a moment. Or
No, thank you, Mayor. I
Okay.
have nothing further to add.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wayne, thanks for the submission. I think it's a very good paper that you've written, outlining some of the potential opportunities and some of the risks. How do you see East Gippsland Shire Council participating in the process of renewable energy development? What's the framework by which we can stay engaged and continue to promote opportunities for East Gippsland?
Talking generally about renewable energy, the issue I think we have is that if you look at the way the wind resource is going to go, it's going to go to the west. Certainly solar has a better return, hence around Western Victoria. So I think a lot of these larger scale solar and wind sort of projects aren't going to come to East Gippsland. And we also don't really have the big draw on demand for power that some of the other locations would have in the proximity to places like Melbourne. I think our opportunities are going to be, and there was some work done around this going back about 4 years now, looking at behind the meter sort of opportunities to reduce overall demand from energy producers or suppliers, and generating our own power in specific locations, and using that to prop up the power grid in locations like Omeo or Orbost, where there's some grid stability type issues. So I think that's really where the opportunities are.
Just a follow-up question, Wayne. How can we continue to advocate? So we're putting in the submission now, if it's presuming it's passed by council, but where's the table by which you can attend or other staff members can attend and continue to advocate?
Good question.
That's not clear yet. I think at this stage there's a lot of detail, like the devil's always going to be in the detail. A lot of the detail's not known. So we need to see how the Commonwealth and the state government respond to this. They're at the moment, they've only really announced this about a month ago, and now's the opportunity for us to sort of just try and highlight some of the higher level sort of concerns that we have, as a Shire, but also as a region. And then we need to see how they respond to that, is my view.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Wayne. Councillors, are there any further questions of our officers on this matter? Thank you, officers. Councillors, there is a recommendation there. Do we have a motion? Councillor Crook, Councillor Uri seconding it. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is obviously not the decision-making forum about whether these wind turbines get built or not. This is our submission to the preliminary government investigation and consultation process. And so I have no hesitation in endorsing our submission, because I believe it covers off on the important elements for our community and our region in relation to this what is of course an unprecedented level of investment outside of our region. It presents some risks. For example, it could draw all of our skilled tradespeople away from our region or away from our shire and into neighbouring shires, something we need to be aware of. It could also provide cheap and reliable power for generations to come, something I'm sure we all would welcome. So I guess it's as much about staying involved in the consultation process and making sure that we maximise the benefit to our communities in the process.
Councillor Crook, thank you. Councillor Uri?
Thank you. I don't have much to add. I support what Councillor Crook has said, but I think, yes, staying involved in the process is going to be key for us in East Gippsland, and perhaps that's attending meetings, but I also see through our state and federal representatives that we need to tell them that this is on our radar and want to stay informed and work with them to get benefit, whatever benefit we can for East Gippsland as well.
Great, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Councillors, I'd just like to add too that the timelines for submission of this particular submission was relatively brief, and I just wanted to acknowledge the work that was done by the officers to bring this to us in a timely manner so that we could resolve to actually have it submitted. So thank you for that. And Wayne, it's a great synopsis. It's sometimes hard to write such detail in a short, brief document. So thank you for doing that. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, Acting CEO. That's carried unanimously. Councillors, we're on to item 5.1.2, and that's a contract for the Omeo mountain bike bridge. You'll find that on page 23 of your papers. And Morgana, that's you still and again.
It is me again, lucky me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Great.
you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report for the Omeo mountain bike bridge, Oriental Claims, which is seeking Council's approval to award the contract for the construction of the Omeo mountain bike bridge as per option 1 in the officer recommendations. Salient points of the report for Council to consider. The bridge is a key component of stage 1 and 2 of the Omeo mountain bike trail. It provides a bridge crossing over the Livingston Creek for the trail, enabling a return loop to the historically significant Oriental Claims area. The trail is approximately 6 kilometres in length, will cater for beginner riders and is part of the first group of the trails to be opened, with completion scheduled for the first half of 2023. The bridge is also required to be complete as part of the design for stage 1. The tender process has identified key costs in relation to cost escalations for the steel. However, we're comfortable as part of the strategy that the costs can be covered as part of the funding arrangements. Option 1, as per the recommendation, is to award the contract. The reasons for supporting the option is it enables the bridge to be constructed and allows for stage 1 of the Omeo mountain bike trail project to open as scheduled and meets the project funding obligations. Option 2 is not recommended, is not part of the officer's recommendations. The reasons for the option is that we will likely need to go to retendering, which will exacerbate our timelines. We're unlikely to find cost savings if we were to retender for the project given the current market conditions. And redesign is unlikely to also provide an appropriate cost reduction. Without this part of the component stage 1, the particular trail would be unlikely to also proceed. I'd like to note the procurement has been undertaken in accordance with the East Gippsland Shire Council policy, and also present tonight is Sajago, Manager of Capital Projects and Plant, who's available to answer any of the technical questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting General Manager. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers about this item and this contract? Councillor Crook.
Am I right in thinking that the bridge is an essential component of this trail and that the trail couldn't in fact be delivered to its existing design without the bridge?
Thanks, Councillor Crook, for that question. Acting General Manager,
Thank you,
Morgana or
thank you.
Sai?
Sorry, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Yes, you are correct.
Can't work without the bridge. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Greason.
Thank you, Mayor. Acting General Manager, if we approve or support your recommended motion, it's going to cost the council an extra approximately $250,000, isn't it? So I'm wondering if you can explain where that money will come from.
Great question. Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. So there's, if I can highlight a couple of key elements, the budget component for stage 1 is approximately 5.5 million. The budget allocation for stage 2 is approximately 4.4. Total value of the project is 9.7. Probably the component that you're interested in is about the particular scope for stage 1 and stage 2. Across both scopes, for stage 1 and stage 2, we have interchangeable elements. There's 54 kilometres in stage 1, 56 kilometres of trail build in stage 1, 64 kilometres of trail build in stage 2. We're confident the interchangeability of the funding, given the linkage of the bridge, is possible within the current funding arrangements. We're also comfortable that amenities such as the showers and toilet blocks that are currently allocated under stage 1 might be delayed minorly while we work to progress the bridge and later seek to do those other elements.
I'm sorry, Morgana, I didn't hear that last bit. Can you speak directly into the...
So, as a summary, we're comfortable with that the funding will allow for the bridge to be built as the key connecting component for stage 1 and stage 2. The funding arrangements for stage 1, yes, there's an additional approximately $230,000 that we would need to find. The strategy that we're using in relation to the components we're building in stage 1, we can delay some of those components to get the bridge built and then work to implement the components that we might hold back, being some minor car parking, some bollarding, some toilets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason.
Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillors, any further questions? I have one question, and I'm not sure how to ask this without potentially revealing the outcome before it's even been recommended, but we have already awarded a contract for the trail construction, which is going to adjoin this bridge which is proposed. And one wonders, and I'm not sure if one needs to wonder, whether the construction of a bridge is a completely separate set of skills as compared to the construction of the trails.
Thank you,
I think
Mayor.
I did actually ask that question without revealing anything then, didn't I? So
It is good wonderment, and yes, I would consider that the experience for construction of the trails is a very different skill set for the construction of the bridge.
So one might be unsurprised if they're two separate entities.
One might be. Thank you.
Right. Very good, because it did cross my mind. I'm wondering why. Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? Thanks for the clarification. Councillors, there is a recommendation there. Do we have a motion? Councillor Greason, Councillor Crook, Councillor Greason, thank you. You've moved it. Would you like to second? No, actually, I'm going to go through this again. Councillor Greason, you have moved the item, and I just need you to check what we have behind me on the screen is that this is the recommendation and this is what you want to move.
Yes, this is the recommendation that I wish to move.
Now, you would like the blanks to be filled in
Yes,
with
please.
the recommended tenderer. And we just got to make sure we've got the right recommended tenderer there. And that's in the confidential section of the report. Okay, are you able to find your way to that section, Councillor Greason?
Would you like me to read it out, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay, so point 1, receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report. Point 2, accepts the tender submitted by Wellcon Proprietary Limited for the contract amount of $489,500, exclusive of GST. The rest of it is, as you can see on the...
As written. Thanks, Councillor Greason. Thanks very much. So you can confirm that. The seconder, Councillor Crook. Can you confirm?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I can confirm they are the details.
Fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, no, I think it's pretty obvious we need the bridge and we don't have a lot of choice about the increased costs associated with this kind of work nowadays.
Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillor Crook?
Yes, just to second what Councillor Greason has said, and also that it's a critical component of this development that clearly needs to be constructed. It's a $9+ million project over several years and will bring great benefit to our region.
Amazing. Thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? I think it is a very exciting proposal, and it's the first bit of infrastructural work in the Oriental Claims area for maybe 100 years or more, so it's quite exciting there. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Acting CEO, carried unanimously. Thank you, officers, that's great. Councillors, we're on to item 5.2.1, which is draft annual financial statements. Mr Cannizzaro, General Manager, take us away.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Councillors, before you is a report titled The Draft Annual Financial Statements 2021/22 and Draft Performance Statement 2021/22, which is seeking Council's in-principle approval to the 21/22 Annual Financial Statements and Performance Statement. The report also seeks Council's appointment of 2 councillors to sign the 21/22 Annual Financial Statements and the Performance Statement in their final form. The key points of the report for you to consider tonight, councillors, is firstly, council is required to produce an annual report within 4 months of the end of the financial year, and the annual report includes the audited financial statements and performance statement. Given the timing of the audit process, provisions exist within the Local Government Act 2020 for councils to adopt the financial statements and performance statement in principle before submission to the Auditor-General. Council must appoint 2 councillors to certify the financial statements and the performance statement in their final form once the Auditor-General has advised that this can be done. As the Auditor-General has advised that the financial statements and the performance statement can now be certified, the 2 appointed councillors will be able to certify those statements following tonight's council meeting. Once the financial statements and the performance statements have been certified in the required manner, they are provided to the Auditor-General so that the audit reports can be issued. The financial statements and the performance statement were presented to the Audit and Risk Committee at a meeting held earlier today. The Audit and Risk Committee provided its in-principle endorsement of the financial statements and performance statement in accordance with the recommendations contained in the report before you tonight. Councillors, also present tonight is Liz Collins, Manager Finance, who's available to answer any of your specific questions.
Thank you very much,
Mayor.
General Manager and Manager Finance. Welcome to the ring. Councillors, are there any questions on this particular item of the officers? Councillor Greason, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. The report, I think, is very comprehensive and quite clear. And thank you for your explanations earlier. I just would like a bit of discussion. A question around the staff turnover of 20.5% in 2022, which is a significant increase in previous years. Please.
Good question. Thanks, Councillor Greason.
Thank you, Councillor.
You happy to talk to that?
Yeah, thank you through you, Mayor. Also on the line, I failed to mention, was Jamie Lynch, who has been instrumental in preparing the performance statement. So I will respond, and if Jamie has any further matters to add, then he may do so. But certainly we've seen an increase in the staff turnover, Councillor Greason. As explained in the performance statement, I refer to page 103 of the 324-page agenda. The commentary within the performance statement, item C7, I think provides the response you're looking for, Councillor Greason, and I'm happy to read it out. The increase in turnover is consistent with trends across Australia, with low turnover during the pandemic due to concerns with job security. With the lifting of restrictions and ability to travel both interstate and internationally, there has been an increase in resignations, as well as earlier retirement of the workforce, which may have contributed to the increased turnover. So we have seen that trend of an increase rate in turnover. There have been several retirements as well that have factored into that that turnover rate. As you can see from the previous 3 years, it averaged out at about 11% approximately. We would expect that to hopefully move back down to a more normal rate in the next few years. But yeah, time will tell, Councillor Greason.
Thanks for that question. There seems to be a bit of a trend internationally as well, I suspect.
Oh, thank you. I would just like to comment that the Audit and Risk Committee meeting earlier, we were told that this is consistent across a range of councils, that this level of staff turnover. Is that your experience?
That's correct, and the Audit and Risk Committee did highlight that as well, and we would support that.
Thanks, Councillor Greason. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Uri.
Thank you. It's been a big day receiving these financial statements and going through them and the draft performance statement, but I really appreciated, as a part of the Audit and Risk Committee, having a chance to ask some questions about this. So I think it's the way this item is all about the statements and how they're reported. It's a formal process and it's very legislated, and we don't have any room to move really. But members of the community might be a bit interested in what's actually in the financial statements. And one of the overall impressions is that we seem to be in quite good financial, state at the end of the 12 months, but there's been a lot of movement. For example, in our CapEx program, we started off with a huge program. We weren't able to deliver all of that, obviously, and perhaps it might have been a bit disappointing for some people to see that result. But just as the staff turnover was a factor for us, which wasn't unique to us, I wonder if we could have some comment about the carryover for our CapEx program, which we weren't able to finish in the 12 months, but we'll carry it over till next year and perhaps even the year after.
Councillor Uri, through you, Mayor, I might pass to Liz, if you could respond to that, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor, Councillor Uri. In terms of, I think the discussion today at the Audit and Risk Committee was really good, but one of the avenues of better maybe informing the community to understand their financial position is through the annual report and the additional information that is provided in the annual report in terms of a financial summary in that annual report, as well as also some of the report on operations as well as capital projects. So being able to point the community to actually read our annual report, there's a lot of really good information in terms of council's performance. It's a lot about that, obviously. So I would propose that the community be directed there, where we do provide that other information. We do talk about, the financial sustainability of council. The fact that the capital works program delivery against the budget was obviously less than the budget. There's obviously many reasons of which the acting general manager or acting CEO may wish to speak further to. And in terms of the impact on the financial statements, there's dollars sitting in the bank at year end that are committed towards those capital works that will then be completed in the 22-23 year. And as council has seen in that, once again, huge program of works. I hope that's answered the question, Councillor Uri.
Yes, thanks very much, Liz. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillors, are there any further questions of our officers on this item? Thanks, councillors, in which case there is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Uri, thank you. Councillor Greason. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to congratulate our staff for being in this position, having put together these very detailed statements, which have been endorsed by VAGO. And today we also were able to hear from our external auditors to say that it had been a very comprehensive and thorough process, and they actually didn't find any major issues with the papers at all. So I think what Council has done through the Finance Department has been very commendable, and I'm very happy to support that we approve these statements.
Councillor Uri, thank you. And in actually moving this recommendation, I think dot point 4 will require you to nominate a couple of councillors, and there's probably no secrets because there may be some giveaway within the report itself. But would you like to nominate?
Indeed,
the
Mr Mayor, I'd like to nominate yourself.
Yep.
And Councillor Allen.
Thank you for that. That's a technicality. Do we need to see that on the screen and through the magic of this? And there it is. Okay. And Councillor Uri, you're happy that's the motion you're moving?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks. Sorry, I should have pointed that out earlier, but thanks for your words. Councillor Greason, you've seconded this and you're happy to second what you see on the screen as well?
Yes.
You haven't had a horrible change of mind after seeing the names there?
But I don't want either of you to represent us. Of course I want you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Would you like to speak to the motion as well?
Oh, just to add to what Councillor Uri said, that it was really pleasing to hear what the VAGO auditor had to say this morning, and the engagement leader, and also the external auditors, just that they found working with the East Gippsland Shire Council staff really easy, and they were very comfortable with the way the whole process happened. So well done, and it's a fantastic report. Thank you.
Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Or would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Allen?
Thanks, Mark. I just would like to thank the input that the Audit and Risk Committee has had, and particularly the time that our fellow councillors, yourself, Councillor White and Councillor Uri, have devoted to that important committee, and also to thank Liz and her department for their great work, because there was no comebacks on it, which is pretty commendable. So thank you.
Good words, well said, thank you. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillors, I might just also add the work of the Audit and Risk Committee, that I think we've recruited an excellent committee, and they are assiduous and detailed, but also high-levelled as well. And we're always glad to seek, accept and act on the recommendations of that Audit and Risk Committee, and that's what we're doing here tonight. And they've been able to give us some good guidance and had some great words which we will take on as a council, and as officers I think their work will improve what we're doing. Councillors, with that having said, let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. See, it's carried unanimously. Thanks, officers. We're moving on to item 5.2.2. Peter, you're still with us, and this is our revised advocacy policy. Priorities.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, yes, I'm still with you. Councillors, before you is a report titled Revised Advocacy Priorities, which is seeking to update the agreed advocacy priorities for the East Gippsland Shire Council. Key points of the report for you to consider tonight, councillors. Firstly, the advocacy priorities are sourced from various sources, particularly council plan, the policies, plan and budgeted approaches, council resolutions as they arise, which require full scoping and costing, issues of the day as they come to the fore. The strategy is a fluid document, as you've seen most recently, that will change as new priorities are identified and agreed by Council. The revised document before you identifies over 30 significant priorities, which includes 8 priorities to inform our advocacy to state government prior to the upcoming election. Tonight with me is Manager Customer Experience and Communications, Nola Brady, who is available to respond to any of your technical questions.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Peter. Manager Brady, good evening. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers? Councillor Van Diggle.
Thanks, Nola. I was just wondering, on page 130, under the title Education, it says the Victorian Government to finalise funding for the upgrade of Bairnsdale Secondary College, provide additional funding and support for regional students having to relocate for tertiary education. So I have 2 questions. Is it normal for councils to advocate on the behalf of the department for funding? Is that what that part states? And then I'll ask my second question in a minute.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question, and through you, Mayor. Council can choose to advocate and support the community or other departments on any requests to try and add a voice to a particular advocacy item. It's not unusual for a council to do that as they're advocating. So that's the first part of the question.
Yeah, and then the second part, provide additional funding and support for regional students having to relocate. What does that actually mean in terms of what do we actually...
So my understanding is, and sorry, I'm deferring to the department who put this advocacy item together, is that funding is to support students to be able to undertake tertiary education and the costs associated with that. If potentially relocating to our area for tertiary funding to attract people to the area to undertake tertiary education, rather than exiting the region where there's opportunities available.
Okay, so it's more for people who come into our region rather than like us supporting people to move to Melbourne.
Yes, and it could be also supporting people that are here with additional expenses and requirements to undertake that tertiary education.
Okay, because I'd be...
Sorry, we're just having a little conversation that we thought that's what we understood by that about supporting local students who, for those pathways elsewhere, and we know that that's often an incredible barrier, I think, for those students.
Yeah, when I read it as having, like, us supporting people to relocate away from our area. That's how I read it. Okay, so it's good that I'm not the only one. And I'd be inclined, I don't know if it's too late to change, but in terms of education, to also, advocate for additional funding or the growth of something like the study hub, which I think is a great initiative at the moment, but I don't think it's meeting our needs.
So...
I obviously haven't read it enough. Whereabouts is it?
Right above it.
The hub. Yeah, but the hub, I'm talking the study hub. The hub is more broad. That's...
So if I may, and then I might pass over
Just
to
clarify
General
that.
Manager of Place and Community. Behind this sits a very detailed 2-pager. So this is just a summary. So we have the one that talks about the hub, which also talks about tertiary education provision at the hub. And we also have, in the detail around the educational one, recognise that not all courses can be provided locally, and to support our young people or people retraining, we may need to see them go away, but we know from our research that a lot of the people that go away then come back. So it's an important part of their development. So I might pass over to, if that's all right for you,
Absolutely. Let's get the right person.
To Mr McConnell to add to that.
Thank you, Acting CEO. There's a range of strategies that we need to implement in this space, because ultimately we want to support the young people of East Gippsland to reach their full potential. And absolutely there's a range of things there. Part of it is things like the hub opportunity to study remotely but in a supported environment. That's one. Part of it is supporting people to access education elsewhere and come back, but also simply to reach their full potential, full stop. And the other one, which is other example I just share with you, we've had recent discussions about, in the post-secondary education space where there is need for people to access education opportunities that are present in Bairnsdale, and there's need for support for people to be accessing that, relocating, transport and similar, to be able to access some of those education opportunities that are available in Bairnsdale, but might not be in Lakes or in Orbost or in some of those other locations.
Could I just recommend that the wording be changed? I know that might be a bit late now because, you know, Councillor Greason as well thought it meant to move away, just in terms of the wording. And I would maybe like to see personally that it's a bit more specific about the study hub, because the hub is really broad. It's a community facility more broadly. I would personally, I mean, I know I've advocated for the study hub for a while, but I'd like that we advocate more for the expansion of that.
So maybe I could just ask, that strategy that sits behind this, does it bring that detail into the clarity and into focus?
Thank you, Mayor. If I might suggest, what we can do and ensure is that the supporting advocacy fact sheet or one-pager explicitly addresses the question of support for the study hub as a tertiary education option in Bairnsdale.
Yep. Cool. And then
Happy with that? Because the hub is that site and the study hub is one element of that site.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then will that also explain then the provide additional funding and support for relocating? Because that, for me, really sounds like.
Councillor Van Diegel, I know your interest in this, but we're sort of a bit down in the detail where this is an advocacy, sort of a high-level advocacy strategy at the moment, and just sort of keep us there.
Is there scope to change the word?
If that's all right.
Or not?
Through you, Mayor, I think General Manager Place and Community has already responded and answered that question. I think the detail is in that one-pager, and that's where it'll be fleshed out. Because at the end of the day, that's the detail that will be presented to pre-state election. Effectively, that will be our ask essentially.
Okay, Councillor. Great, Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question sort of relates a little bit to Councillor Van Digel's in that I'm curious about how frequently this policy will be revised, or the priorities can be revised. I know we say it's a living document and it should be, I think, and Councillor Van Digel wants some wording changed. I would also like to have something else on the advocacy policy. So can you just explain do we have a set process for changing and in changing the priorities?
Thanks for the question, and through you, Mayor. We do state up front that the advocacy priorities document, which is separate to the policy, can be changed due to a number of factors. It can be changed when we do a thorough review. It can also be updated as a result of resolutions through council or things as they arise on the hop. So if there's something that's pertinent, council can choose to ask to have the document revised. In terms of timelines to get this out to state elections, that's what our focus was, to make sure we hit that mark and get this not only to our state elections but also to the new ministers for the federal elections that have recently passed. Beyond that, I would expect we would update it at a minimum of yearly or annually, but 6 monthly if required, and then ad hoc. So councillors can approach us with changes and then they can be discussed in councillor briefing. So it is a fluid document in that we're reliant on you to inform us on what you need.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor. Councillors, any further questions, clarifications? Thanks, councillors. There is a recommendation there. Do we have a motion? Councillor Greason, Councillor Crook. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Just briefly, I think these are really important. They are the priorities of the advocacies that we as a councillor group have selected, and as has been explained, we can change them if we choose to. They're important because they tell the community and interest groups and stakeholders and government bodies what is important to East Gippsland Shire Council at this time, and that we will be advocating for at every opportunity. So I think that it's a good list as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Good words. Councillor Crook.
Yes, I totally endorse the document as it stands. Advocacy is a very important part of what local governments do these days. It's essentially enshrined in the new Local Government Act. The days of rates, roads and rubbish are still very much with us, but council also play a very important role in advocating for our communities and the various needs, wants and desires of our communities to other levels of government and decision makers who of course have an influence over what we do, because we don't exist in a vacuum. So I totally endorse the strategy as it stands and look forward to future revision.
Councillor Crook. Councillors, is the motion opposed, or would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Councillors, I'll just make a note then that each of the 6 regional Gippsland councils has their own advocacy strategy, and out of those strategies becomes the One Gippsland advocacy strategy as well. So this is important to know, that these key items in this also feed up into the One Gippsland advocacy strategy. So it's not without importance, and it's all part of a region-wide strategy that we have. So, and I recognise those within this as well that we're also advocating through One Gippsland on. So they're very important, and as Bairnsdale Secondary College is very much a local advocacy, but we look at some of the other more region-wide advocacies that flow across into One Gippsland, just as examples. So thanks for the work, and I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried unanimously, CEO. Councillors, we're moving on to the next item, and that will be our revised, pardon me, it's item 5.2.3, our draft media policy. Peter?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillor, before you is a report 5.2.3 titled Draft Media Policy. Councillors, you'll be familiar with this draft policy. It was presented at a council meeting on the 26th of July 2022, at which point the substantive motion that included an amendment was lost. So 99% of the document you'll be familiar with. What we have done is made a minor edit to the policy to clarify an aspect within the policy, and that was in the subsection of the policy, and that subsection is comment as a private citizen, and you will find that on page 145 of the 324-page agenda. The changes made to provide better clarity around the personal views of councillors and staff when interacting with the media, and references to the respective codes of conduct, both the council code of conduct and the staff code of conduct. I won't read the entire new paragraph in the policy, but it is found at 145. Tonight also is Nola Brady, Manager Customer Experience and Communication. Councillors, if you have any questions, thank you.
Indeed, thank you. General Manager, questions, councillors. Councillor Crook.
Yes, thank you for this. I just note that in point 3, the policy seeks to authorise the Chief Executive Officer to amend the adopted policy without formal council consideration if the amendments required are of a minor administrative nature. I just wonder if you could outline maybe an example of what a minor administrative change would be.
Yes, certainly.
Good question, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. Minor administrative change might be a position title that's referenced within the document, for example. There might be references to a local, an act that might have been repealed or might have changed or amended. So those minor administrative changes, I think, are quite operational and can be done with the CEO's approval, rather than bringing a policy with minor changes back to council.
So anything that isn't substantive, I guess?
Essentially.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Certainly if there's an impact on, the remit of councillors in terms of, say, commenting as a private citizen, we'd bring that back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that explanation. That's a good question. Councillors, are there any further questions? So there is a recommendation there, councillors. Do we have a motion? Councillor Uri, Councillor Crook, Councillor Uri, to speak.
Yes, I'm happy to support this recommendation. I think the thing that was unclear before, the passage or the issue that was unclear before has been amended. I think this gives very clear direction to those people to who it pertains.
Thank you. Councillor Crook.
Yes, just to reiterate that, it's important to have role clarity in terms of who speaks on behalf of the council. I think this document does that well, and also articulates the clear capacity of councillors to make public comment as private citizens. So I welcome it.
Councillor Crook, thank you. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Acting CEO, carried unanimously. Item 5.2.4 is the Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Policy. Thanks, Ms Brady, for that. Great. Mr Cannizzaro, you declared a conflict of interest on this matter, but you will remain with us?
I will. Yes.
Thank you.
I will present the report, Mayor.
Thanks, councillors. So this is item 5.2.4. Mr Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So, council, before you is a report, item number 5.2.4, titled Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Policy. Councillors, before you is a recommendation from the Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Committee with respect to adopting a draft revised policy. The policy gets reviewed from time to time. We engage with Maddocks, our lawyers, with respect to these particular matters. Maddocks presented to us some recommended changes that were discussed and considered at the committee level. The changes are noted on page 169 of your papers, councillors. The proposed changes considered by the committee and have now been included in the draft amended policy is the incorporation of a new clause, 3.11, which outlines a process to follow in relation to any matter under the policy or the CEO's contract of employment that may be in dispute. This was quite a detailed change, but provides a lot of clarity and details the process. You will note on page 194 of your papers, councillors, that in the current policy, it's a one bullet point reference to dispute resolution. So this policy has now been proposed. Policy has now addressed a more detailed, stepped-through process for dispute resolution and allows the committee and council and the CEO to work through matters that arise potentially from time to time with respect to employment and remuneration matters. The other changes have been additional paragraphs that provide more clarity around the executive search consultant provider. Also, we improved the ties back to Local Government Act 2020, and there were some administrative changes around renumbering of clauses, abbreviations. We've repositioned clauses to make the policy flow a little better as well. I'm with you tonight to answer any questions.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillors, are there any questions? Yeah. Councillor Uri, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have quite a specific question, Mr Cannizzaro, and it's on page 193 of 324. It's under the section titled Appointment of CEO, and I'd just like to clarify the meaning of this sentence. So it says the council's role is to appoint the CEO, comma, on the advice of the committee. So I'm just querying the meaning of that statement, because I'm assuming that the council does not need to follow the advice of the committee. It needs to hear the advice of the committee, but not necessarily act on it. So I'm just wondering about, I think it revolves around that little word on the advice of the committee. I might be reading it in a particular way, or if there is lack of clarity, perhaps following the advice of the committee might be better, perhaps just one word. Could I have your comment?
Certainly, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. And again, this is on the advice of Maddocks as well,
Okay.
that particular change as well.
Yep.
My view is the council's role is to appoint the CEO.
Yep.
But they do get advice from the committee, so the whole of council has the opportunity to consider and make a decision on the appointment of the CEO. I would expect that matters would be discussed prior to decision-making time around the appointment of the CEO. I don't see a need to change that particular sentence.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that advice. Thank you.
It's a very interesting point, because it would be a bold council that would make an appointment without the recommendation of a committee that they've appointed themselves, I would have thought.
Certainly. Certainly. But it works the other way too.
It does, doesn't it?
You can listen to advice and act on it or not.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's
Anyway.
an interesting point. Sometimes the English language is lacking somehow. It doesn't provide enough. Good question. Any further questions, councillors, of this matter? Yeah, Councillor Allen.
Peter, does this policy impact on existing contracts in any way, or this is exclusive of them?
What the policy does, and thank you, Councillor Allen, and through you, Mayor, what the policy does is it becomes the reference point for all manner of things related to the CEO, employment and remuneration, effectively. This will tend to, in many cases, override the contract.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's a good question. So it becomes effective immediately upon resolving it here tonight.
That's correct, Mayor.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Thanks, councillors. Thanks, General Manager. On that basis, there is a recommendation. Do we have a motion, councillors? Councillor Stowe, you're on that committee. Thank you. Councillor Allen, Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the matter?
No, not really. Thank you anyway.
Okay. Councillor, you're a few words tonight. That's Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Only, look, this has been well and truly considered by the committee with expert advice from Maddocks, and I think that it's a good policy to be going forward with.
Yep, great, thank you. That's what you were thinking. I think you channeled it. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? In which case, Councillor, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. There we are again. CEO carried unanimously. Councillors, we're on to item 5.2.5, which is nomination to the MAV substitute representative and draft motion. Mr Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Councillors, before you is a report titled the Nomination Municipal Association Victoria Substitute Representative and a draft motion, which is seeking approval for Councillor Stowe to attend the MAV State Council meeting and approval of the draft motion. Key points for you to consider tonight, councillors. The next MAV State Council will occur on the 14th of October 2022. Council's appointed representative is Councillor Mark Reeves, the Mayor, who is unable to attend the meeting, and Council is not previously appointed as substitute representative. MAV requires a resolution of Council to enable a substitute to attend, in this case, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Crook has posed a draft motion for consideration at the MAV meeting. It is for MAV to advocate with the state government for the establishment of a statewide program for invasive species control, especially in periods of regrowth following natural disasters. As a substitute representative will be attending, MAV requires a resolution of Council to submit this motion by the 23rd of September, so very soon, councillors. I know that's a public holiday, but we'll work through that. Tonight with me is Albert Allen, Manager Governance, who is able to field any technical questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Peter. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Stowe, your life is about to change by attendance at the State Council. Councillor Crook.
Mayor, I can't tell you how pleased I am to be going.
Just one question. Is this a temporary substitution?
Good question. Is this a temporary substitution for... Yeah, that's a good question in terms of, are you going to ask then, do we need to have a permanent substitute in case?
I wasn't going to ask that.
That is a good question, though.
That is an obvious question.
Short answer is, thank you for the question, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. The short answer is yes, it's temporary.
Temporary, great. Okay, we can do something about that other question another time, but thanks for that. Councillors, are there any other questions around this matter? Thanks very much. Councillors, there is a recommendation, and here's the motion there, and a seconder. Councillor Crook, Councillor Allen.
Well, I think it's a two-part motion. First of all, I'd like to endorse Tom's motion on invasive species. I think it's a major problem and needs to be addressed. And I think the MAV may not be ready for Councillor Stowe, but I reckon he's ready for the MAV.
Absolutely. Councillor Crook.
Yes, Trevor's definitely the man for the job, and I thoroughly endorse his appointment in a temporary status.
Thanks. Councillors, is the motion opposed? And would anybody else like to... Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thanks, councillors. I'll just add that I think that the motion that you've proposed, Councillor Crook, is really important. We've seen the press release from the Victorian Government about the under-resourcing of this particular matter. And so this is a really, really important issue for us and our councillors who are exposed to this all the time. Councillor White, you've spoken to this matter so many times. So I think it's really important, and go well and go hard in there, Councillor Stowe. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Carried unanimously. Thanks. Mr Cannizzaro, you are relieved. Mr McConnell, I think this is your patch now.
Thank you, Mayor.
And this is item 5.3, Place and Community, and we are now on a planning permit application 508/2021/P, multi-lot subdivision roadworks, removal of native vegetation, Christmas Street, Meetung. Councillor White, thank you. We note your conflict of interest that you've declared, and for the record, Councillor White has left the room.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good evening. And officers.
Councillors, before you is a report seeking your approval to issue a notice of decision for approval of an application for multi-lot subdivision roadworks and removal of native vegetation at 7 Christmas Street in Meetung. The relevant points from the report for Council to consider is the application received a total of 13 written objections and was subject to a planning consultation meeting on the 24th of January that I'm conscious that a number of you attended. Following the PCM, the applicant lodged revised plans in order to avoid the removal of 2 mature trees and to provide for a future extension of the subdivision road into the adjoining vacant land, and that's in response to some of those matters that were raised at the PCM. The 2 trees to be retained will require measures to ensure they are protected during construction. The 2 trees to be removed will require vegetation offsets because with the subdivision they're presumed to be lost. These matters are included in the conditions of the permit. The proposal on balance is found to be consistent with the relevant provisions of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme, and the overall subdivision layout and lot density is consistent with the provisions of the scheme and the prevailing neighbourhood character. With me this evening to assist with any questions you may have is Martin Richardson, the Manager Planning, but I'd also like to welcome Michelle Dixon, Statutory Planner, to the table. I think this is the first time Michelle has made it.
Michelle Dixon, welcome to the Chamber and welcome to the team.
And I also know
that Robert there as well.
Is online.
Ever present.
Thank you.
Councillors, here we are. Planning application. Any questions? Councillor Crook, thank you.
It's currently a big paddock with 4 big trees in the middle. The plan is to chop it up into a bunch of blocks. Why can't we save all the trees and just put the blocks around them like's been done elsewhere?
Thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. I'll ask Martin Richardson to assist.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I suppose the objectives of planning for the residential zone are to facilitate residential development primarily. They do come with objectives in relation to vegetation protection and a whole range of other things. But given that the land is zoned in a general residential zone, the primary purpose of the zone is to facilitate the development of residential lots. In the subdivision design, always the aim should be to design a subdivision such that it preserves whatever environmental character it can, but sometimes that's not practical. For example, in this site, to create lots which are standard size for a general residential zone, in fact some larger, up to 1,100, 1,200 square metres, you need to put a road in. And if you put the road anywhere other than through the centre of the lot, then you can't facilitate an orderly and rational subdivision layout. That is, if you were to take the road to the left or right of the stand of trees, then you would be creating small square lots on one side of the road and long rectangular lots on the other. So the aim with the subdivision design of parcels like this is to, where possible, to protect and retain vegetation, but also to get a rational development of lots that facilitates the development of housing in the area. In this case, I might just add that we've attempted through the applicant has attempted through the revised plan to retain, or has succeeded in retaining 2 of the trees. But again, I would point out that the state policy in relation to subdivision of land of lots of less than 4,000 square metres is the vegetation is presumed loss. And that's a matter of state policy. And that, I think that policy is there to say that in cases where land is zoned residential and is to be developed for residential purposes, then you wouldn't apply the same kind of requirements for vegetation protection as you might in the rural zone or in the low density zone or in other zones. So we believe that the application has succeeded in practically retaining some of the vegetation and in delivering residential lots in what is about balancing those objectives.
Okay, thank you. So what measures will be implemented to ensure the retained trees are allowed to continue to exist if there's a presumed loss once the blocks have been created?
The 2 trees to be retained will be within the road reserve, so they'll be owned by council. They'll be on public land, managed by council. That's quite a different scenario to them being on private lots where they could be actually removed. So there are both measures in the conditions of approval for the protection of the trees during construction, and also given that they will be retained within the road reserve, then they'll become council assets.
Thank you.
Good question. Thanks for that, Councillor Crook. Martin. Councillor Stowe, question.
Could I just ask about those 2 trees in question? Are they of such a size that they could become dangerous to the houses in the area? Gums have got a habit of dropping limbs.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Yes, any large mature eucalypt tree has a potential to become dangerous. Again, in the management of the trees, when the trees become a council asset, you know, we obtain arborist advice in relation to safety of trees. Careful pruning can occur if necessary if there are limbs that are dangerous, and also it's noted that both of the trees will have any overhang on the residential lots will be quite towards the front of the lots, so there's plenty of room for the normal residential setbacks for houses to be set well back from any potentially falling limbs.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor Uri, thank you.
Thank you again. I have two quick questions. One's about the trees again. I noticed.
And they don't have to be quick questions, by the way. So they, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just looking at the proposed conditions, and number 6 speaks about the offset requirement. I note there that the offset secured must provide protection of at least 2 large trees. Is that normal practice to require that? Because we're often concerned with the offset being a lot younger and smaller than the tree that's being removed.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, the offset requirements are calculated on what are referred to as habitat units. It's technical, but there are 0.05 general habitat units required. And where offsets, so that partly relates to the removal of native grasses, because you'll see from the plans that there's a patch of native grass to be removed. And when offsets are required, they both compensate in relation to offsets for the loss of, shall I say, lesser vegetation, but they require, when large mature trees are to be removed, they require the offsets to actually provide for the protection of large mature trees to the similar number in whatever offsets are purchased. So it's standard practice that when large mature trees are removed, that large mature trees are protected on some other location.
Thank you. My second question relates to drainage issues on this particular block. Could you please explain how they will be managed, please?
Yes, thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. So the standard practice for us with subdivisions is that we put a condition of approval on the permit, which requires a drainage management plan to be prepared. As we all know, drainage issues are somewhat difficult to deal with at the moment everywhere. This site is also difficult, slopes away quite radically. But we have had some initial discussions with the applicant in relation to what drainage arrangements might be put in place to give us some level of comfort that it can be managed. And then a condition of approval is imposed, which requires a detailed drainage management plan to be provided to our satisfaction. If it turns out that that plan doesn't properly cater for the drainage requirements, then we go back to the applicant and ask them to do additional design to make sure that it does. So there's a safeguard in that condition that requires us to sign off on what's called the secondary consent for that drainage management plan, and that's assessed by our technical officers at the time of that plan being lodged.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor, is there any further questions? Thank you, councillors and officers. In which case, councillors, there in front of us is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Allen. Seconded Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think quite a few of us sat on the PCM.
Yeah.
And at that time, I from memory, I think all 4 trees were going to be removed. So I think that the developer has gone away and taken on board what was said. So I think that's a good result, and I believe that the outcome is the best that we could get for that block of land. So I have no hesitation in supporting it.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Uri.
Yes, not much further to add. I think it's a reasonable result, perhaps not a good result, but I think it is a compromise. And yeah, I think the person who's developing the block into residential areas has the right to do that as well, and we need to be reasonable about what we approve and what we don't.
And good pick up on the word.
Councillor Uri, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would you like to speak against the motion there, Councillor Greason?
Thank you, Mayor. I note in the documentation that Crowther and Sadler stated that the vegetation is not considered to be high conservation value. However, we're talking about the removal of 2 East Gippsland coastal grey box trees, which are high conservation value and which are old and which are rare, and which provide habitat and help retain biodiversity where land is being developed. So I do acknowledge the work that's gone into revising the subdivision in order to retain 2 of the trees. However, 2 trees that are many, well, probably hundreds of years old, will be cut down to make way for the development. Offset vegetation does not replace them, or does not replace all of the values of those 2 East Gippsland coastal grey box trees where they are. Other than this, I actually have no objection to the subdivision and accept that it's an inevitable part of this region's growth. But given the amount of development occurring, I think it's essential that we prioritise, that Council starts to look at prioritising how it occurs and how we protect our iconic vegetation. So it's really a statement of principle, but that's the basis on which I'm opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason, for those words. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for the motion? Would anybody else like to speak against the motion? Councillor Allen, as mover, you have a right of reply.
No more, Ed.
Thank you. Councillors, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? The motion is carried. Do you have the details? Thank you, thank you, councillors. Thank you, Acting CEO. Thank you, officers. Councillors, we're moving on to item 5.3.3, which is our draft planning delegations policy. Councillor White, you are invited back into the chamber. Thank you, Councillor Uri. Welcome back. Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yours again.
Councillors, before you is a report seeking your approval for the draft planning delegations policy. And I just note this is a significant piece of work, and it's essentially a new policy that's been developed to guide the operation of planning decisions. The purpose of a planning delegations policy is to establish a framework for delegating authority on planning application matters in a manner which facilitates both efficient and effective decision making, but also ensures accountability for staff in relation to that decision making. The draft policy has been prepared in accordance with guidance provided by DELP on planning decision making in local government, but also informed by the practice that's been used in a number of other councils. The draft policy provides criteria for applications to be referred to council by officers and processes that enable councillors to call up applications for council determination. So consistent with the DELP guidance, the principle is that decisions are made under delegation except or called out by exception. The draft policy introduces the following key changes. The scope of the policy has been broadened beyond planning permits to include delegation for all of the relevant statutory planning matters, but still enables council to make determinations by exception where that is appropriate and necessary. It extends the call-up provisions and specifies criteria for call-up both by councillors and also by the Chief Executive Officer, so it provides clarity about those processes. Includes wider obligations for informing council of intended decisions in specified cases, and that will really enable council to make informed decisions about which of the applications that they want to see and the council wants to make the decision about. It removes the formal mediation process for planning permit applications with 9 or less objections, but I do note that informal processes are still available to seek resolution where parties are amenable to seeking a negotiated outcome. And also, as was pointed out to me earlier today, members of the community also have access through councillors to raise issues that they're concerned about. It introduces new delegations to the issue of notice of decisions to approve a permit where there are objections, and a notice of decision to refuse a permit which does not comply with a planning scheme, subject to councillors being informed in advance. It introduces requirements for officers to refer a matter to council in specified circumstances to maintain transparency. So again, where there are various circumstances where it's important that decision making is made in a public forum. It details representation by officers in VCAT, which is really important, so that officers are properly authorised to make decisions and negotiate on behalf of council in that forum. It also addresses delegations to manage 173 legal agreements, which again, the option is there for councillors to call up where they deem that necessary. So there are a number of things there. I haven't mentioned everything, even though that's been a relatively long list in terms of the nature of the changes. What I would like to draw to your attention in preparation for this evening, we identified a minor amendment to the draft policy that would be desirable to make, and I'll just ask Vanessa that if she can show that on the screen. The effect of this was previously the policy identified that where an officer, a relevant manager or a councillor has a financial interest in an application, that matter would be referred to council for decision. This is one of those matters of transparency, and just for consistency with other policy and legislation, the amendment indicates that needs to be a declared interest, so we know what the interests are, and then secondly, that it's aligned with the definition of material interest in the Local Government Act. So there are 3 places in the policy where that change has been made. And Vanessa's just showing those on the screen. So with that, the amended policy is considered to represent best practice in local government decision making, and we commend the policy for your consideration. Again, here this evening to assist is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning, and Robert Pringle, Statutory Planning Coordinator. So thank you, Mayor.
Thanks for those clarifications and explanation there too, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers? Councillor White.
Thanks, Stuart. Now, you're saying that you need a group of councillors to view a planning application and consider that they might like to call it in. But conversely, you're saying that even though you could do something just following the rules as just a standard procedure, but if your officers felt that there might be something a little awkward about a planning permit that was possibly straightforward, you could still make a decision to actually address the group, the council group, about a particular planning permit.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor White.
Good question.
And through you, Mayor. The policy really provides for those 2 opportunities, or 3 opportunities in fact, for officers to refer something to council if, for example, there's a matter of policy or if there's a matter of significant public interest in the matter. Those items can be referred to council for decision. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some circumstances where in the interests of transparency the matter must be referred to council. But similarly, the opportunity is there for both the CEO to identify that this is something that he would like to see go to council, and similarly for councillors to identify that this is a matter that they would like to see, and those provisions are similar to in one sense to the existing arrangements for councillors to call in or call up an application that wouldn't otherwise come to council.
Is that okay, John? So you're comfortable that if an officer has enough of a concern or it sees it as public interest? That was your question, really?
Yes, although Stuart did say could be brought to council, but I was thinking perhaps the word might have been will be brought to council if an officer just has a feeling about an application that perhaps doesn't sit well to just do it under delegation.
Yeah, so the expectation would be that where a matter is of significant public interest, for example, that the officer would refer that through to council for decision. I might remind councillors also that even under the existing arrangements. The vast majority of planning decisions are in fact made under delegation.
Yep. Yep. Good points. Good question. Thanks, John. Have another one?
Look, because I've been reading stuff all day, is this something that aligns with other local government areas? Were we any different, or are they, we coming to align ourselves with many other municipalities?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Watt, and through you, Mayor. And I'll ask Manager Planning in a moment to add to it. But there's two things that we've really been informed with in this. Is firstly the guidance that's provided by DELP about what is good practice in decision making for planning, and then secondly, informed by the practice at other councils. So I won't say all councils are the same by any means, but certainly there's nothing in what's proposed here which is outside what is being seen as good practice in other councils.
Thanks, Stuart, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, so we put the call out to all the regional councils to have a look at their delegation policy, and there was a flurry of activity. There are, I suppose, three tiers. There are some councils that take a fairly cautious approach with delegations policy, and I would suggest, with respect to those councils, they possibly don't have many planning staff, and they may be much smaller councils, where they sit where we used to sit, 5 objections, $5 million cap. Anything above that goes to council, and a couple of those planning staff that I spoke to said that lots of stuff goes to council. In the middle ground are councils where, and I'd refer to, I think it was City of Mildura, Shepparton, some of the bigger regional councils, which don't have an objection trigger, so council staff have delegation to make decisions in relation to applications regardless of the number of objections, but they do have those public interest tests and other triggers where if there's a public interest issue or policy issue that's not clear, then they're referred. And then the clear flag bearer in this space is the Shire of Wellington, where not a single planning application ever goes to council. I spoke to the manager there, and in his 12 years, not one single planning application has ever gone to council. And he could recall in that time that none were called up either. Now that's a different scenario, and I've mentioned this I think in the briefing. The Shire of Wellington, very stable councillor group, very stable staff group, a lot of years of built up trust, and we'll get there. But they are the clear leader in terms of innovation in terms of this policy, and it doesn't seem to have backfired on them. So we've picked the ground which is consistent, as Stuart said, with the guidelines of DELP. That is, that delegation should occur as a matter of course, unless by exception matters go to council, and that's the approach that we've taken with this. But as we've mentioned in the report, there are various processes in place for us to inform you of decisions that are coming up, inform you of decisions that have been made, and councillors will also note that after 1 year we'll bring back a review of the policy to see how it went.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you, Martin. Councillors, are there any further questions? Not sure if Wellington's the council to aspire to be like, but anyway, there's always a little rivalry there. But councillors, there is a recommendation there. Do I have a motion? Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillor Uri. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Look, I've had a good discussion with the General Manager and Manager Planning, and talking around a number of issues, seeking clarification and about my concerns being that transparency and proper governance not be compromised in any way. And I'm comfortable that the changes won't do this, and in fact will improve efficiency. But it does behove us councillors to pay a lot more attention to our weekly councillor newsletter and to request that certain applications be brought to our notice if we have any concerns about them. And I trust that we're going to do this, so I support the recommendation as put.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the research you did. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very happy to support this. I think the rationale behind the changes is sound to me. I think striving for best practice is a great idea, and I know a lot of work's been done with DELP in the planning area. I think there are enough safeguards here for us to feel comfortable, and I really appreciate the fact that we will be reviewing it in 1 year's time, because I think, like all our practice, if we're striving to improve and we have a review time when we can change, I think that's a really good model. So very happy to support it.
Great, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor White.
Yes, I'd just like to say that there's a built-in safeguard there, which is to review it in 12 months, and perhaps if we find that there's been nothing untoward or, you know, no issues, I think then it would continue. If we find that a few have gone through to the keeper, we could have another talk about the situation at that time in 12 months. So thank you.
Councillor White, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillors, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Acting CEO, you've got those details. Thank you, officers. Mr McConnell, 5.3.4 is a summary of East Gippsland Business Awards 2021 and future considerations. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an overview of the delivery of the East Gippsland Business Awards and the outcomes from the 2021 awards program. You'll see in the report some information that outlines both how the awards were conducted and also some of the feedback both from sponsors and from participants. And I think in that context, I'd just like to note that it was a fantastic process and it was a fantastic evening, and particularly in the context of it being one of the early events that brought the business community back together post-COVID. And so in that sense, it was a really important undertaking, but also one that was quite challenging in environment to step forward in. That said, you've got the feedback in there, which I think was really positive and reinforced the value of that work. What I would do in that is also just recognise the contribution of all those sponsors that supported the event and the staff that made that event a success. Notwithstanding that, there's two matters that really bring to our attention consideration of the future of the awards. One is the ongoing success of the Gippsland Business Awards, and the Mayor earlier in the evening highlighted one of the recipients of an award through the Gippsland Business Awards, and East Gippsland businesses feature within the Gippsland Business Awards regularly and are able to participate and, I suppose, compete in that environment quite successfully. So I think that's important to recognise. And the other thing is also in the context of the economic development strategy that we'll bring to Council shortly, there will be significant demand for the focus of the resources that Council has in economic development activities. And in that context, the view is that the resources that have currently gone into support of the East Gippsland Business Awards are better focused on some of those items that are identified in the economic development strategy. And so at this stage, what we're proposing and what the recommendation recommends is that we switch our attention, and as outlined in option 1, to support businesses to participate in the Gippsland Business Awards, that we don't continue to run the East Gippsland Business Awards, and that the resources that were assigned to the East Gippsland Business Awards are in a sense reinvested in other economic development activities. And the other thing I would just note is the Economic Development Fund, which was the source of the resourcing for the awards, is something that Council makes decisions on. It's not something that officers can simply make a decision about where those funds go. We will bring reports to you at various times to make recommendations about the allocation of funding from that source. So with that, you have the recommendation in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, any questions? Well done. Councillors, in which case there is a recommendation there. Do we have a motion? Councillor Stowe. Seconded Councillor Van Diegel. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I think it was summed up well by Stuart. I think it's a sensible approach and have no hesitation in recommending it to the council.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor Van Diegel.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I didn't really raise my hand, but I am happy to to go with this recommendation. I voted against it last year too, which was, I think it was only Councillor Stowe and I, which probably made us slightly unpopular, but I just feel like it's a massive investment for council and the money could be better spent elsewhere for businesses.
See, I knew you'd have the right words to say, you see. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would you like to speak? Councillor Greason.
Just to surprise you. Look, Stuart said it himself when he said that this is a really important event. This was a really important event and it brought the community together. And I think the paper outlines it in detail, just how much local businesses and the community value these awards, and the sponsorship and other in-kind contributions by other organisations testament to the belief that this is a significant event and the value that they place in it. We spent less than $20,000 and plus staff time, of course, and we received $33,500 in sponsorship plus an estimated in-kind support of about $14,000. That's a significant contribution from the community for not that much that we put in. So it's important that council be engaged and visible to businesses and the broader community, and I think now is not the time to be pulling back from these kinds of activities and support to businesses. And I think that we should wait until our economic development strategic direction's bedded down and clear and then review it. I just want to make one other comment, is that small amounts of money, like less than $20,000, taken out of something that is specific and has a, and has a really important purpose, is in my experience in management, is it just disappears unless it's very specifically targeted to another activity. So I think that $20,000 is just going to disappear and the staff time would be taken up with other activities. Those are the reasons I'm not supporting this motion. Thank you.
Good points, well made. Councillor Greason. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor White.
I was just looking for some clarification.
Clarification? Sure.
Because
Get an opportunity.
the numbers that Councillor Greason's been speaking is not my recollection of the briefing. So I thought it was more that council contributed.
Councillor White, thank you. We'll just get that clarification to a fact check there. Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Councillor White, and through you, Mayor. So we initially made a larger allocation from the discretionary fund, but in practice with the extent to which the sponsorships and similar came online, it meant that the cash contribution, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for it right now, was in fact just under $20,000, so it was $19,000 and similar was the cash contribution. There was also staff costs, etc., that we were able to contribute to this event, which were estimated about just over $17,000, which wouldn't normally be available. We'd need to find them from some other source, largely because in the COVID environment, other events, for example, were not operating, and so some of our event staff, etc., we were able to reallocate to this purpose. So the costings there were just over $19,000 in cash and a bit over $17,000 in staff time equivalent.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that clarification. Thanks for the question. We're in debate, so I will just resume debate now. So would anybody else like to speak to or against, for or against this motion? Councillor Uri.
Thank you. I'd like to speak in support of the motion. I think we've already discussed in some of the items we've considered tonight the need to support the business community. I think that the reasons given in the officer's report for removing the funding for this event are quite reasonable and acceptable, but I do look forward to the economic development strategy and the actions coming out of that so that we can consider how we can best support the business community in other ways. I think that's an important part of the equation. Thank you.
Councillor Uri, thank you. Councillors, I'm going to speak in favour of it as well, on the basis of having been privileged enough to be able to go to the East Gippsland and the Gippsland Awards. And I see this as an opportunity to support our businesses to have that higher aspiration and maybe to support them to punch above their weight on a regional basis. And when I saw our local businesses in that game at the Gippsland Business Awards this year, it really made me proud. And looking at the other businesses who were there, they're really punching above their weight. And I think that and if we can perhaps use this opportunity to reinvest in other businesses to spread their wings and to have higher aspirations, then I think that's a good use of it. Having heard and agreed with much of what you said, Councillor Greason, I still do support the recommendation. But Councillor Stowe, you have a right of reply.
Yeah, look, I don't think the Business Awards achieve much locally. I think if the business people want to go out for a night on the Crownies, they can do that, and they can organise their own affair, or the Chamber of Commerce or someone else. I don't think it's our responsibility to do it. $20,000 is $20,000, so I'd sooner see it go to put a new floor in the NZ Hall or something than to be wasted, well, I consider wasted on an event like this. So I don't think, I agree with the motion, and I don't think that we should vote against it.
In which case, we will put the motion to the vote now.
Can I?
No.
Alter.
Sorry, I have to be extremely blunt. And I know that the Manager of Governance was looking at me just in that moment to say exactly the same thing. Sorry, Councillor. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, Councillor Greason, for being a dictatorial chair then. Councillors, we're moving on to urgent and other business, and I don't think there is any, and now we're going to move into confidential business.
You need a motion.
In which case I will need a motion that we close the meeting to the public according to the provisions of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following list of items, which is item 7.1, Gippswide Organic Process Tender. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, move it.
Councillor White. Did you want to speak to the motion?
No, not necessary.
Is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against it? I'll put the motion to the vote to close the meeting to the public. Thank you, councillors. Carried unanimously. Councillors, we're back in public. It is 8:34. And councillors and those who are viewing us, once again, as I've said before, I just want to acknowledge the work of the officers for producing excellent reports that make it easy and better for us to make good decisions. And councillors, thank you for your due consideration, because to make a council meeting like this has required weeks of briefings and hundreds of pages of reading for you to make those decisions. So I really acknowledge that work and the work of everybody here. And we're doing it all for the betterment, we hope, of our community. So at 8:35, I'll declare the meeting closed.